What's on, where and when. It's the Talk of Nelson. Talk Nelson Radio. The Mako Rugby Roundup.
Welcome to episode 4 of the Mako Rugby Roundup for 2023, where we cover all things rugby in the top of the South. And it's a welcome back to Les Edwards.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Bit of a rest for you last weekend, Les.
It was a disappointing rest, though. Yeah. I'd much rather have rugby, but that weather was pretty abnormal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Very excited to have the very honourable Max Spence with us today.
Indeed, yes. Welcome, Max. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks for the kind words there, Les.
And for those that don't know, Max has been involved with local rugby for many years, which we're going to find out more about, and currently the president of New Zealand Rugby. So great to have you here indeed. And Sean, didn't get a bus load over to Motueka this week.
No, like most people, mate, the weekend's activities were disrupted with weather.
Yeah.
So, like Liz said, a little bit disappointing, but you can't do much about it.
But a bit of a crowd down to watch the nighttime rugby here at O'Shettigans.
Yeah, well, we had a few in. Again, rain-affected conditions, even inside, but it was
right.
it was a lot of rain, a lot more water than we're used to.
Yeah, that's for sure. Nice to see the sun out and the snow in the hills. On the show today, we're going to be talking First 15 rugby, senior club rugby, super rugby, and of course, we're going to be talking to Max about his history in the game and what's coming up with New Zealand rugby. But first, our venue sponsor, O'Shettigans on Bridge Street. It's the Shed Chat, and it's quite difficult to get that golf tournament going, isn't it, at the moment?
Yeah, mate, we're running low on time, but I think the weather's come right. We've postponed this event now a couple of times.
Yes.
So we're looking for the Friday, the 19th of May. I think the sun's going to come out, and unfortunately, we've actually had to move venue as well because there's a bit of destruction to the golf course we were booked in at. So we're shuffling a few things around, but hope to have some updates out this afternoon on our venue and confirm some teams and get it through next Friday.
Okay, we'll keep things posted, and a heart goes out to the Waihi boys because they've only just fixed the thing.
Fixed it.
Yeah. And now they've got to do a load of work as well. So good luck to them there, getting it back on track and dancing for a cause. It's forever creeping closer.
Yeah, a lot closer now, mate. So I've got like I said, golf tournament next Friday going to plan. We've got the dress rehearsal Saturday, and then a full week of costumes and trying things on and try to learn how to dance. But I think we're in Trafalgar Centre on Thursday night next week for a second dress rehearsal, and then go live on Saturday following. So it's it's going to come up, sneak up really quick. Yeah,
awesome. Looking forward to that. Okay, Les, let's get into it. First 15 rugby.
Yes, so Friday, we're going to have Marlborough Boys College away to Shirley Boys High School, and Nelson College playing their first game on the rejuvenated and refreshed front field, hosting St. Bede's.
Yes.
Now, that's Saturday at 12 noon, and they're playing that on the back of a very good win against St. Andrews last weekend. So, the Nelson College factory, if you like, or dynasty continues under coach John O'Phillips. So I would imagine there'll be a huge crowd out there to celebrate this game.
Yeah, I'll have to go up and see where my squares are.
That's right, our $20 squares.
Well done, guys. We should acknowledge the effort that's gone in from some of the local community, both those that were sponsors and past old boys, I think we should call them. And they've really put their shoulder to the wheel and done a great job. So they're handing something back to the college.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone sort of pitched in, didn't they? And, it was a great initiative, I thought, by everyone being able to contribute financially as well. So, good stuff. And Nelson College had a good win last week.
Yes, they did. They beat St. Andrews away, which is always a good start to the season. St. Andrews, traditionally a very powerful top 4 team. So, the Nelson College would be very pleased with that. And St. Bede's, of course, is a tough proposition themselves. So a big crowd would help them.
And Marlborough Boys, did they play last week?
No, they didn't. So this will be their first game. Waimea Combined are also going to have a game. They're playing 12 noon on Saturday at Waimea College, and they're hosting Rangiora High School.
Right, cool. Good luck to them, and that's at Waimea College, so good chance to
Yes,
get
sir.
along and have a look. Senior club rugby and the local competitions have all wrapped up, so we know Central won their final, but it came down to points at the end of the day in the Nelson Club table. Is
Yes,
that right?
it did. So with the washed out round, Marist were on top of the table. Due to play Stoke, they were, but it didn't eventuate. So they've been crowned the Nelson Bays Sub-Union champions, and I believe Nelson Bays president Kerry Strange will present that trophy to Marist at their club rooms on Saturday, which also happens to be the Marist Club Day. So a nice little
wow.
celebration.
How's that?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so what happens now as we go into the Stuffed Tasman Trophy?
Yes.
And what's the lineup for this weekend? How does that look?
Well, the defending champions, Central, are playing Nelson at Lansdowne Park. Kahurangi will be hosting Stoke at Sports Park Motueka. That's Huia's club day. Muteri on their club day are hosting Waimea Old Boys, and then a very good matchup at Trafalgar Park, Marist versus Waitoi.
Okay, well, we'll start with you, Les, on Central versus Nelson at Lansdowne Park. Nelson ever improving, and Central obviously the form team over there, so going to be a tough match.
Yeah, it will be a tough game. I just can't go past at this stage, not having seen any inter-provincial rugby. I can't go past Central at this stage, but they'll have to play very, very well for 80 minutes to get over Nelson.
Okay, Max, Kahurangi versus Stoke. So you're a Stoke man. Have you had a chance to watch the team as yet this year?
No, unfortunately, I haven't.
No.
Although I did intend to a fortnight ago. Last week I was down in Otago, so it didn't bother me the fact that the round had been cancelled.
Yeah.
But look, I'm going to go with the heart, and I'm going to
back the boys.
Run with Stoke for a win away.
Yeah, nice. Good to see. Muteri versus Waimea Old Boys.
Yeah, I think this game holds a bit of potential. A couple of teams that have struggled early, but yeah, I haven't seen like Les says the crossover over of the unions or of the provinces, regions. I think the Waimea guys travelling away may struggle over there, but it's a good opportunity for them both to get a win. Yeah.
Good stuff. And I'm going to go over to you, Max, because we've got two Marist boys here. There's a complete bias. So Marist versus Waitoi. Obviously, Marist have been the form team. So what are your thoughts there? It is a home game for Marist too.
So I might be one of the only Catholic boys associated to a degree with Marist. So I'm going to stick with.
You're going to stick with Marist as well.
Well, that's very good.
They're all over the place.
I'll get your membership signed up at the end of this podcast.
Les didn't know I was a left footer.
No, I did not know.
There you go. Senior women round 5. So how does it look there, Les?
The top of the table clashes, the must-see game. That's Kahurangi versus Marist at Sports Park Motueka at an earlier time of 11:45 a.m. Done so that we can get our Marist women back to the club rooms for our club day. But that is an exciting game. Both sides on 16 points. And then Waimea Old Boys are travelling over the Whangamoa to play Wairau Wahine as part of the Muteri doubleheader for their club day.
Nice. And default last week. So good to see perhaps the teams are back on board and getting the competition going again, which is great.
That's Waimea Old Boys. I think they've got some props and some players who had to go away last weekend back.
Yeah.
So they'll be keen to get some rugby under their belt.
Good stuff. Okay. Super Rugby round 11. And we've got the Chiefs versus the Reds on Friday. Les, Chiefs were pretty good against the Highlanders, weren't they?
Oh, they are. They're such a good team. Well coached. Craig McMillan, I think, has got to be on New Zealand Rugby's radar for various events that are coming up, with the All Blacks 15 and some other tours that he could possibly take control of. But a very good coach, an outstanding team. Great to see Anton Leonard-Brown back. And Max, I saw that you presented him with his 100 game reward. Proud of him. He was fabulous, and that's good for New Zealand Rugby to have him back. So in terms of this game, Chiefs versus Reds, I'll have to take Chiefs by 20 plus.
Right, and Force versus Fijian Drua. And we said that they're good at home, and boy, what an upset that was.
They come through, didn't they? Yeah, I think, like Les said, with the Chiefs being hot favourites against the Reds, the interesting part of the table for me is the four teams sort of vying for 7 and 8 on the table. The Reds currently holding, I think, 6th or 7th, something around there. But Fiji are sitting in 8th currently, and they'll back themselves here with the Chiefs upsetting the Reds. They probably hope they can get a decent win and sneak above the Reds on the table as well.
Yeah, and they do have to travel, but nice hot weather, so they'll be used to that. But Force always strong at home. Max, Hurricanes versus Moana Pacifica, and geez, they almost did it, didn't it, Moana Pacifica? Les had written them off, and then they almost beat the Blues, It
was great rugby, and what we're going to see this weekend is two teams that were disappointed.
Yes, right.
Going head to head. Hurricanes obviously disappointed to drop that game. Moana Pacifica very unlucky to lose to a good Blues side. So I think if you had to make a call, I think the Hurricanes are going to get up. Yeah,
they'll be up for it. Crusaders versus the Blues. Wow.
Yeah, this is mouth-watering, and at 7 p.m. on a Saturday night and at a venue, watching this one will be the place to be.
Yeah.
Look, you've got to love the way the Crusaders are slowly coming back. They're getting some good players back into their mix. And I love the form of the Mako back three there, and Maka Springer, Lester Whanganuku and Will Jordan. How wonderful to have Will Jordan back in the fold. And then the Blues, who, they'll be stung because they nearly got pipped by Moana Pacifica. Look, if I'm a betting man, I would never bet against the Crusaders at home. Okay. So, I think they'll get over the Blues in a tight one.
Waratahs at home versus the Rebels. And I missed actually the Rebels and the Brumbies. Who got up on that?
The Brumbies ended up.
The Brumbies did win.
Yeah.
Right, okay. So, Waratahs at home. So,
yeah, again, it's the Rebels are another team right on that sort of cusp of the top 8. I think they'll be targeting this as a potential opportunity to get some points, yeah.
Okay, and then the Brumbies finally make it home, but the poor old Highlanders, they have to travel away, so it's going to be difficult for them, isn't it, Max?
It certainly is. I think the performance we saw from the Highlanders last weekend against the Chiefs was a commendable effort. They played hard, the full 80, up against the top team. Had they been playing any team out of Australia, other than the Brumbies, they would have won by 15. So they're getting there. They just the ball doesn't bounce their way,
and injuries are really getting to them, aren't they?
And they've been decimated with injuries. But the Brumbies will be too good in Canberra.
Right, there we go. Thank you very much. You're with the Mako Rugby Roundup, and our very special guest is Max Spence, who's president of New Zealand Rugby. Great to have you here. Max, you're a Stoke Rugby Club man. And what was your involvement with Stoke in the early days?
So initially, I left Nelson and did a bit of work as pre-entry into university, Lincoln down in Canterbury. After I finished there, I worked in Christchurch and in Marlborough, and then I eventually made my way back to Nelson. And at that time, Stoke was a club that had several old Lincoln students in the club, and they just happened to say to me one night, we need a manager of a senior team. So basically, it all started there. So probably one piece that I need to add here is that I've never played a lot of rugby in my youth. I found that I was better at football than I was at rugby, and I always had to warm the pine. So whereas I always got 90 minutes playing football. I came back into the rugby environment, and I used to say to rugby people, if you got to leave it to someone from football, well, so be it. I had a great love of the game right from early years, and grew up in a family that enjoyed rugby. But as I say, football seemed to be my career path at that stage. Stoke was a club that was building and literally building. They had a little club rooms, which used to be the old Stoke Library opposite the turf, but they built on the corner of Songa and Marlow or whatever. And so the club showed a lot of heart, and led in those days by your old Beattie, who made sure that everybody knew that on Sunday morning the club had working bees. So all these boys would have a big night Saturday and then have to put the tools on Sunday. And as I say, the club had a lot of heart, had been a long time between drinks, so to speak, in terms of winning trophies. So I was fortunate to come into the club in 1980. And 1981, you'll recall, things were a bit tipped up with the Springbok tour. So rugby went through a bit of a bad patch, and we had members in the club who supported the tour, and we had members in the club who were dead against it. So that created some issues. But the club's, the club was staunch and worked well together to complete the club rooms at that time. And in 1983, while I was still managing the side, well coached by Derek Griffiths, the Welshman teacher from Nayland College, who's iconic in the Stoke Hall of Fame. The Stoke managed to win their first championship in many, many years. And so that was fantastic. At that time, and because I'm involved in the agricultural sector, I was doing a lot of travel around New Zealand. Agriculture and rugby go hand in hand. And people used to say to me, "Where are you from?" And I'd say, "I'm from Nelson." And they'd say, "Oh, it's a great basketball town." And they would always mock our performances around on the rugby field. And I just felt like we needed to do something about that because we had the players, but we just weren't quite getting there. So I said to the Stoke club, I wouldn't mind if you thought about perhaps putting my name up to go on what was in those days Nelson Bay's management committee. So Stoke supported me onto that, and for a period of a couple of years, I was on the Nelson Bay's management committee until I jumped off to go and do some overseas travel. So I owe Stoke a lot, and I'll always acknowledge the fact that there were several people who encouraged me to get into Stoke, and the Stoke club supported me, and so I've got to look back on that and with some affection.
Yeah. Well, actually, you were chairman of Nelson Bays from 1998. And in 2003, you first conceived the idea of entering a combined team with Marlborough and the NBC. So tell us a little bit about the rationale and how did you get the Tasman team across the line regionally, especially with that divide in the hill, As soon as you cross the hill, you become a Red Devil. So
called the Whangamars.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'll try not to make this a long story, but because of my involvement as chair of Nelson Bays, I also had an opportunity to sit on the Crusader board. And sitting at Super Rugby level got me a little closer to Wellington in terms of New Zealand rugby and what they were thinking of doing. And so they were talking in 2003 about expanding the competition at Division 1 level. And they were looking to perhaps bring unions up to expand that competition. And I saw an opportunity there, but also I was very conscious of the fact that New Zealand were going to slap criteria around what the unions had to be able to meet to be able to play at that level. And Nelson Bays was never going to be able to do it on its own. First criteria was the number of people within the province, so 100,000 people population base. So we weren't there. And in the time that I was the Nelson Bays chair, I had a good relationship with the Marlborough Union and the Marlborough chair at the time, Mark Peters, and some of their board members, and so I spoke to the Nelson Bays board about, here's an opportunity sitting here, but it's going to take some thinking, a lot of hard work, but we've got to have a story, and so we met as a Nelson Bays board in the first instance. And I got to a degree their approval that we should then head over the hill and talk to Marlborough. Marlborough didn't mind the idea, but they were very keen on a joint venture, as opposed to my pitch was around an amalgamation. So the point that I tried to make to Marlborough, and they used the Vikings as the part of the previous joint venture, which wasn't successful. And I said, joint ventures like flatting, as opposed to amalgamations like marriage. And if we go flatting and things don't go right, we have the opportunity. It's easy to go home to mum. And that's what happened in the Manawatu Hawke's Bay scenario. There was nothing binding to make them work hard to honour that commitment. And so I was able to get that message through that we had to actually throw everything in the middle of the table. And I mean everything. And it wasn't just like working with one team. This was everything down to the lowest possible grade or level. And we had to become a new entity and create two sub-unions. So we started, as I say, those discussions 2003, worked on it all through 2004 and brought in an accounting firm to assist and guide us through that. And in September 2005, the Tasman Rugby Football Union was incorporated after we'd had the approval of New Zealand Rugby. And of course, through that whole process, 2004 and into 2005, we had to do our pitch to the New Zealand Rugby Union, and they decided at that stage that they would add into the competition North and Manawatu counties and the new Union of Tasman. And that's basically how it happened. And then in 2006, we joined the competition, and you'll probably ask me some questions about that. And then in 2008, when the pressure came on and we got a reprieve, and I'd like to think from 2008, the foundations were laid, and we all know now, history tells us that Tasman's a very successful union.
It's working.
And I continue to travel around the country on a regular basis, and almost to a person, Tasman's their second favourite provincial rugby team. So awesome. I think we've got a lot to be proud of.
Yeah, I think you've just covered off questions 3, 4, 5 there. So what we'll do is we'll delve a bit deeper, Max. So because I'm interested in going to New Zealand Rugby, who went and what were the conversations, and how did you win them over to allow Tasman to get involved in this NPC for 2006?
Okay, so Les, probably the first thing, and that's not us rattling the drinks either, is it? So the first thing is that Tasman found itself in considerable financial difficulty. In 2007, so our second year in, a major sponsor decided to withdraw their support of the union because of some actions of a third party, which I won't drill into, but the major sponsor was upset with some activity that was taken from out of town, and they withdrew their sponsorship. And I'm talking, at that point in time, there was a shortfall over $500,000. So that was a big black hole. To be able to meet the criteria that I referred to earlier, the new union, Tasman, owned Lansdowne Park. That was an asset that had come across through the amalgamation. Previously, it was an asset of Marlborough Rugby. So we had to upgrade the Lansdowne Park facilities, and we took a significant loan out to be able to accommodate the construction of a new stand and various other improvements. And that required significant fund to service that debt. And when you lose in excess of $500,000, it puts all sorts of constraints on the way you operate and your ability to service your loans and just your operating costs. So we had to work pretty quickly, but at the same time as we were having these financial challenges, the team was still, participating in the competition, but at the bottom end of the log. Chris Moller was the CEO at the time, and his advice to me back in 2005 and into 2006 was, don't worry about the results on the park, Max. Just make sure your financials are tight. And that's really sound, prudent financial advice. And I respected it then, and I still respect it, and I've got a lot of respect for Chris, and I see him regularly today. But the thing is that, the sponsors and the fan base, they want to see success on the park as well, because everyone loves a winner. No point sponsoring someone that's coming last. No point going to watch somebody that's getting a hiding. And so we had to perform as well. And so we incurred additional costs to try and lift the performance of the team so that we weren't sitting on the bottom of the log, and we could work our way through and eventually hopefully get to a point where we were playing semi-finals at least. Now, we achieved the latter, but we also continued to have our issues with finance. And that's when New Zealand Rugby decided that perhaps the competition was better if they scale it back again. And at that stage, they were talking about taking the 4 teams that had come in, taking them back out, going back to a 10-team competition. So we had to work hard, and we had to lobby New Zealand to get them to stick with the original plan and not to revert back to a smaller competition. And so we went to Wellington and lobbied them. And so the Tasman contingent was myself as chair, Peter Barr, CEO, and Todd Blackadder as coach. So Peter was a very effective, efficient, well-respected CEO, and he had the ear of the staff, the executive team at New Zealand Rugby, and they respected his opinion and his capability. So we were doing well there. We had Toddy Blackadder, who everybody loved Toddy for what he contributed to New Zealand rugby, and he's a man that speaks from the heart. So when we sat down in front of New Zealand Rugby, the board, and it was a full complement of the board, Peter really gave the detail around what we had as a plan and our program, and the fact that outside of the financial pressures and that we had to call on New Zealand Rugby over that 2007-8 period for support, we could see light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm confident, and well, proof was in the pudding. They believed him. Toddy pulled on the heartstrings, and my closing comment, I recall vividly saying to them, and you'll recall that in 2007 we lost the World. We got chucked out of the World Cup in the quarters, and there was all that debate going on around whether Graham Henry should continue as coach, and they should switch to Robbie Deans, and I think we all remember that quite vividly. So I just wanted to remind the board at the time that they demonstrated to us that they were prepared to give a second chance, and if they were good enough to give one to Graham Henry, I felt strongly that it was they needed to give one not only to Tasman but to the other three unions as well. And the following night, I got a call from Jock Hobbs to say that the board had contemplated and considered the 4 presentations, and he could only speak for Tasman, but just wanted to confirm with me that we would be staying up in the competition.
Oh, fantastic.
So
yes.
so that and of course I continue to come back to say that the rest is history.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a real groundswell amongst the public, I remember, during that time as well. With the 4 unions, I remember listening to Talkback, and I can't recall anyone saying they should all go. It was all about grassroots, and and that we should be supporting grassroots. So I just think a combination of the hard work that Tasman put in, but also the general feeling of the public was why throw them out just because of this? We need, and look at what's happening with these unions now. They're flourishing. Great players are coming out of the region. So
locally, there was a Save Our Mako campaign, which drummed up a huge amount of support and some financial contribution to help with the whole. So the people are very passionate when it comes to your backyard's rugby team, and I think we must always remember that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Max, understanding the amount of work that's gone on, prior to that point, could you have conceived back then just how well or how successful that Mako brand would become?
I think I'm a very proud man in terms of top of the South, and sort of my agricultural, horticultural background means I've got a lot of passion for what comes out of Marlborough, and of course Nelson's home. So I was always of the view that we could do a lot better. I felt that Nelson, Marlborough, even Nelson on its own, should model itself on somewhere like Taranaki, and that we just needed to we need to have that plan and just put some pieces in place. I can remember vividly saying to Jock Hobbs when he said, you've got to have a facility that's capable of hosting a Premier or First Division semi-final. And I said to him, well, that's a wee way off, Jock. And to be honest, it came a lot quicker than what I ever thought. But, to Les's point before, and I think the hardship that Tasman had to go through brought a lot of people off the ropes in our community. And they all wanted to own the Mako. And, with good marketing and the fact that, Fins Up and everything else has captured the imagination of people, it's driven others to do better. And so, we've created an incredible rugby environment here with the community support on both sides of the hill. And when you think that there's capable players from other regions who want to come to Nelson, because this was all about pathways, and it wasn't just pathways for players, it was administrators, referees and coaches. But when you just think about players from other unions who were very good players, they had their place in their team, but they liked what they heard about what was going on in Tasman. And it's not a bad place to live and play your rugby. That was always there. We just needed to light the fire. So I knew it was possible, but to have the number of All Blacks that have come through Tasman in the last 5 or 6 years is way beyond my expectation.
Yeah, we used to marvel about that, didn't we, on another radio show at some point? They're saying, oh, there's a couple of All Blacks, and all of a sudden there's 7 or 8, and last year, how many of those players were missing from the last season's Mako. So just an incredible story. Around about that time, the early days of the marriage, as you call it, and a little bit around that time when, there was questions around financial stability. I do remember some dissension in the ranks, not only on the Nelson side, but on the Marlborough side as well. So there was 2 trains of thought, definitely. Yes, we need to do this together. And others saying, no, it just needs to go back to Marlborough Rugby and Nelson Rugby. So does that kind of still go on, or, how do you keep that marriage going, I guess?
Well, I'd be really disappointed if I thought that it was still going on, but this is a generational thing. And, from time to time I hear a bit of history being pulled back up, but that's human nature. But you ask somebody that was 10 years old when the Tasman Rugby Union was formed, 10 years old then, 28 going on 30 now, do you think they're worried? Kids don't want to be Griffins and Red Devils, they want to be Mako. When they go down to watch their provincial team play, they've got the Mako colours on. I mean, it's been consigned to history, but there were personalities involved, and I think we've long gone past that.
I think it must make you very proud. I mean, to conceive an idea and then to see it blossom, yeah. Max, it's a massive achievement, and I don't blame you if you are very, very quietly proud. After that, about 2009, you resigned as chairman of the Tasman Rugby Board, but you ended up more involved with the Crusaders on their board, and then Tasman and the Crusaders thought it a good idea to nominate you to be the vice president of the rugby union. And just wondering, did that take you by surprise? And are you what do you see as your role in that black suit and black tie?
Okay. Yep. So look, I had 11 years on the Crusader board, and I stepped down there partway through my term because we were going from Super 15 to 18, and I felt that they needed to be thinking about what that was going to look like from Crusaders' perspective, and there's no point having somebody on there that was going to be stepping down a year later in here. So at that point, I stepped out of rugby, and that was 2010, 2011, the year of the earthquake, and we all know what happened to the competition that year. And then I had a 10-year break from rugby, and it wasn't a conscious effort, but I kept my nose clean. I kept out of rugby politics, and I didn't make any comments because there's always 2 sides. I was driving through Central Otago through the Cromwell Gorge, and I took a phone call from Tony Lewis, CEO Tasman, Stuart Mitchell, who was on the board of New Zealand Rugby, and they asked if I'd like to consider my name going forward for the Southern Zone nomination for vice president. That came as a bit of a shock, but in fact, I don't remember too much of the trip getting to Queenstown Airport, because my mind started to wander at that stage about what that might look like, but also everything that had gone on beforehand. So so I was very privileged very proud of the fact that I was considered for the position. Today, like I had 3 years as vice president, but there was an extension of a year because COVID made a mess of what our terms looked like at that stage. So there was an extension of a year. So that gave me 3 years as vice president. I've completed a year as president. I've got another year to run. It's very much a privilege to serve New Zealand rugby and the community as president. Something I'd never ever thought that it was never part of the plan. But everything that's associated with New Zealand rugby, and got to remember that it's our national sport. Most people have an opinion on it, whether they're sports minded or not. And I'm not critical of that. And it doesn't matter where I go, people will tell me more often than not what's bad with New Zealand rugby more than what they'll tell you what's good. Again, that's just human behaviour. But there are other sports codes who would love to the engagement with the community that I'm fortunate enough to have. So when people come and talk to me wherever I might be about what their view is around rugby and what we should do or shouldn't do, I listen and I give them the respect that they deserve, because they are talking about our national game. As president, I've been privileged last year. I had 2 weeks with the All Blacks in South Africa and then five weeks with them over on the end of year tour. So I sit in an environment with them, with the players and the coaches and management team, where I'm just part of it. I see and hear incredible things. I watch high performance sport at a level that, I sometimes wish we could extract it from the sport and bring it into our business, whether it be corporate or small to medium business. There's a lot of learnings that we could take around high performance and how we lift the bar and get people to do better, longer. And I just wish I wasn't at the end of my career, and if I knew then what I know now and what I could offer up in a business sense, it would be outstanding. But having the opportunity as president to sit around the board table, particularly over the last couple of years with the Silver Lake discussions, what's going on in and around global rugby, where we're at in terms of the power base in the Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, what we're doing with future competitions, sponsorship, our whole strategy around women and girls, the success of the Black Ferns last year, just growing the game, trying to link back into the community, building bridges, making sure that people don't just think that New Zealand rugby is around the black jersey, but to think that New Zealand rugby is about what's going on in the Arbitrary Valley and over in Collingwood, and what's happening at 7-year-old level and all the way through, and what's happening in Golden Oldies, what we're doing for referees, what we're doing for those players that have been injured during, by participating in the game. This is a big business. There's so much that's being thought of. There's a huge amount involved.
Yeah, of course, it's World Cup year as well, Max. We're pretty excited to be involved in hopefully another successful campaign.
That's right, Sean. And there is talk, of course, that this is the most competitive World Cup. And I'm sure they're right when you look at the draw and you think that when we get to the quarterfinal stage, there's a real possibility. Well, it's not a possibility; it's a fact that you look at France, Ireland, South Africa, and New Zealand. There's 4 teams who should, by all accounts, get to the quarterfinals. But the way the draw is, 2 of them will go home. So which 2? We don't know yet, obviously. But 2 of those teams won't get a chance to play in the semi-final.
Well, I think one of the things you've got to do is lobby your other presidents to make sure that the drawing of the pools isn't done immediately after the last World Cup, but closer to the next.
Yeah, you've got the answer, Les. So no, looking forward to the campaign. And before that, of course, we've got Tri-Nations in Bledisloe. So we've got only 2 domestic tests this year with Australia down in Dunedin and the Springboks playing for the first time at Mount Smart. We go to Mendoza to play Argentina, and then we play the Springboks again in Twickenham, just 2 weeks out from the start of the World Cup.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the All Blacks.
Yeah.
But also, let's not forget that the Black Ferns have got a really big program this year.
Yeah.
So they've got the Pan-Pacific or Pac-4 with Australia, the US and Canada. And then there's this competition which New Zealand will be hosting this year, where the top 3 Northern Hemisphere teams, let's say, for example, England, France, called semi-finalists in last year's World Cup, and say possibly Scotland, they will come down and play in New Zealand against the top 3 from the Pac-4. And so Black Ferns have got a lot of good rugby ahead of them as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a big year. Max, in your current position, just to clarify, you've got the New Zealand Rugby Board and you've got a chairman and you're president. So how does, what's your role in that? What does the president do as a representative of what, provincial rugby?
Yeah, no, good question, Chris. Yeah, so president, vice president are elected by the members.
Right.
So that's the provincial unions and the likes of the Murray Board. So they come on and they have the opportunity to sit around the board table, attend all meetings, no voting rights. Depending on who the chair is of the day will determine what speaking rights the president has. So I'm very fortunate that the chairs that I've served with and alongside have always sought the view and the opinion of the president. So I've appreciated that. I've listened to previous presidents speak when they've gone around provincial unions and talked a little bit about their role, and they generally used to talk about it being a ceremonial position, and they would go and speak at funerals and go to rugby provincial union centennials and club centennials and hand out trophies and cap All Blacks. Bill Osborne, who I served under as president, so Bill was president for 3 years. I was vice. He and I rewrote the position description for the presidential suite, and we've taken it up a notch or two, and we've tried to make it a little bit more supportive of governance, and taken the opportunity that we have to talk and engage in the business of the union when meeting. And so we put that back to the board, and they signed off on a rejigged position description for presidential suite. And so we like to think now that we do have some constructive input into some of the strategy and day-to-day business, rather than just going around and, dare I say it, shaking hands and kissing babies.
And presumably a portal for the feedback from the provincial unions. Would that be correct?
Yes, not every union takes that opportunity to, chew the ear of the president or the vice president, but we are an avenue back. But I think the way the board is structured now, and the fact that we have board members aligned to provincial unions, the communication lines are much different today than what they were previously, and so they don't have to necessarily look at the presidential suite as the feeder back into the board. Right. I see my role as president. I work very closely with the CEO and the chair, and we have a lot of discussions around matters in support of both those roles.
And with that in mind, Max, the future, they've written us off for the World Cup. There's interviews this morning with was it Jeffrey Archer, English? No, we're not going to win. France is going to win, although France and England meet in the semis. So, he read off England too, but he said, no, the All Blacks aren't going to win this year. I don't know. I don't know. I think there might be something bubbling in there. But getting past that, looking forward in the development work that you've been doing, bright future?
Rugby's got a very bright future. I mean, we've got talent, not just, again, at the player level. We've got talent at coaching level. We've got really good administration. We've got to make sure that we run our financial budgets prudently, but with the relationship, the transaction that took place with Silver Lake, for all the right reasons, we've shored up our financials now. I think in terms of an investment perspective for the long term, we've just got to make sure that on an annual basis, and it goes for any business, we've got to make sure that we're working within our means. And that goes for New Zealand Rugby Union, Wellington, but across all our members. I think we've just got to get the balance right between high performance and our representative jersey, whether it be our provincial colours or our black jersey, and never lose sight of the fact that we've got to invest in the community game, because it's from the community game that we will eventually have the potential to go away and win World Cups.
And that was a big message from Lyndon Bray with the Tasman Rugby CEO. He a big emphasis on putting back into community and grassroots level, wasn't it, Les?
Yes, if we don't put an investment into community rugby, then the whole top will implode in. Yeah, absolutely. So, and Max, I couldn't say how more proud I am that the head of the New Zealand Rugby, a president who is from Stoke, from Nelson Bays, from Tasman, rising to that role, it's absolutely fantastic, mate, and you do a terrific job at it. Delighted for you, delighted for us locally as a union to have you around. And yeah, you couldn't have picked a better time to be president, to be honest.
Well, it's been a challenge, but Les, I really appreciate your words, and you and I have been on this journey together. So You've pumped my tires up more than once, and I appreciate that. I'm proud of my own achievements, but representing the Tasman Union and given where we came from, I think is we've locked it in now in terms of we have a place in New Zealand rugby. I'm sure we're closing off shortly. I just wanted to make one comment, and that is, if there's one thing that winds me up, it's when people who really aren't in a position to say, but they talk about the game's dying, and I can understand they make that comment if they base it purely on what they see bums on seats, because societal changes have meant that people don't necessarily go to the park like they used to. Interesting that they still go down and support their club, but it's getting them to go to the big games. But we shouldn't make judgment on the fact that the game is dying on that basis, because every piece of information that we're getting at the moment, Sky viewership's gone up this year. We hear a few bad things about the super competition, but that's fashionable. We've seen some good games in the last couple of rounds, and we're looking forward to the next 5, I think it is, before we get into quarters and semis and finals. But there's some really good rugby being played. We're building a competition that fell over during COVID with losing Argentina and South Africa, and that's part of our tradition. And to lose that and to start again, I think that's an admirable job done by both the Australian Union and New Zealand to bring Moana Pacifica and Fiji and Drua, and hasn't been easy, but and it won't work in the first year perfectly, but we're seeing some really good growth and it's responding really well. So look forward to that competition growing. We heard some news yesterday about New Zealand rugby and its relationship with Japan, and there's more of that to come. So look forward to seeing growth of the game in the South Pacific, and because we've got to do stuff down here, because the Northern Hemisphere have got tremendous opportunity to continue to build their game up there. So we've got to be smart about how we go about reinforcing the game in the Southern Hemisphere without losing the fact that it's a global game. But the one point that I want to make is that for all those reasons, that there's some really hard work and some good things coming out of it. People are watching the game. They're just not necessarily going to the game, but they're watching it on Sky and they're live streaming. And there's growth in both that viewership and the live streaming piece.
Yeah, and a lot of highlights consumption.
Yeah,
and podcasts.
and
Chris.
podcast. That's right.
And we're part of that, aren't we?
Thousands. I guess the only disappointment from Les's point of view is that if you'd known earlier, he would have had you in a green jersey and you would have been a Maris man. But
So look, I've got a witness that can attest to this. So when travelling with the All Blacks on a Tuesday night in a normal week, playing Saturday, Tuesday night is what the All Blacks call their club night. So for about an hour and a half on a Tuesday night, they all get together and it's club night and they have to wear their club jersey. And that's everybody, players, management and coaches and people like myself. So I have the privilege of attending these club nights and they're a lot of fun. Last year on the Northern Tour, I took 2 jerseys with me. I took a Nelson club jersey. I hope no one from Stoke picks up on it. But it can be rectified. I've got room in the bag for another jersey. So I took a Nelson club jersey and I took a Maris jersey.
Wonderful.
Oh.
And in fact, just as recent as last Saturday night, Shannon Frizzell, a good Maris man, said to me on the ground down at Forsyth Bar, "Are you going to bring the Maris jersey away with you this year, mate?" Right. So he and I will rock on up in our Maris jerseys, and then the next week I take sides with David Havili.
Right.
And I
Smart man,
wear a
Max.
Nelson jersey. So all I need to do now is take a Stoke jersey, but we need a Stoke All Blacks.
yes, we do. I'm sure we can rustle one up from somewhere in the provinces. Thank you very much, Max. It's been a pleasure having you here and wonderful insight into what's happening, your background, the history of the Tasman Mako and how that evolved and survived and grew, and going into seeing behind the scenes of what's happening at All Black board level, and very pleased to see that the game's in good hands and it's got a bright future. Very exciting time. So really appreciate your time with us.
Well, thank you, Chris and Les and Sean. I appreciate the invite.
That was good.
The opportunity to tell a bit of a story.
Good stuff. That's it. And Les, you'll be able to get out in the park this weekend, will you?
Yeah, well, the sun's shining, and I'm sure that all of the Marist and Waitoy supporters will be at Trafalgar Park. They'll be at Sports Park Motueka for the club day there, Stoke v Kahurangi. So, yeah, we're looking forward to it, aren't we, Sean?
Big weekend of rugby, Les. It'll be good to be back outside for a bit, and then I'll be parked up at the bar watching the Blues and Crusaders on Saturday night.
Yeah.
Might even hang out for a wee dance afterwards. Yeah.
And right here at O'Shedigan's,
Yep,
a venue
we'll be-
sponsor
exactly.
on Bridge Street. So don't forget that. That's it for another edition. We thank you for your company, and we will see you all again next week.
The Mako Rugby Roundup. What's on, where, and when? It's the Talk of Nelson. Talk Nelson Radio.